Hello, and welcome to the Oral History Series regarding St. Joseph's Church. This series is primarily focused on capturing the perspectives of current and former parishioners of St. Joe's. Today, I am pleased to welcome Kathleen Allan and Klaus Ruhland, who will be sharing their perspectives and experiences about St. Joseph's Parish in Ottawa. Welcome, Kathleen and Klaus.
Hi, Terry.
And thank you for joining us today. So, the first question I ask each parishioner who joins us in these oral sessions is, when did you start coming to St. Joe's?
The first time I would have been at St. Joe's was between 94 and 95. I remember there was a priest, now I think I have this correct, and he walked on the aisle, I think it was Father Jerry Morris, and he was a big man, as I recall, and he walked down the aisle singing, and I thought, boy, is that ever different? He was very personable. And then I hadn't, at any rate, that was my first visit here.
And what attracted you?
Well, a number of things. Initially, it was Jane Williams. I had never, so at that time, the choir loft was this little round thing that they stood in, but Jane Williams stood down on the left side of at the front there, where the piano is, and she discussed the three readings, and she linked them together. I'd never heard that. I didn't even know at that time that they were chosen in that way and that they related to each other, and and of course the music was wonderful. The other good thing was it was close to Ottawa Little Theatre, and I was doing a play a year, worked backstage, and so that worked out really well. I could just walk down to the theatre. Mm-hmm.
Good. Now, just for our microphone's a little weak at times, so if you can speak up a bit, that would help too.
Okay.
So, Kathleen, did you initially find St. Joseph's as a welcoming parish?
It probably was. The bulletin was great, but I was kind of shy. I was coming to St. Joe's all by myself, and I was really shy. But there were so many activities on. They had the singles. There was just so much going on. And but I didn't do anything. I was going to go to one thing, and then I was at the back of the church, and I was going to join this group. But they all seemed to know each other, so I just went. And but how I did start was at the supper table, and that was great because you could just come in. So we would have to be there, I think 4-ish, and so we would have to be there about 4 o'clock, and we would do whatever had to be done. The meal was all prepared, and we would whatever we had to do, and bit by bit people would come in after work. And so we would have a team of maybe 5 and 6, and I was the Monday group. And and so I got to know people then, and I got to know, then I had hip replacement, and so I couldn't do that. And so, I don't know, it was probably Gary that said something about the O'Mara sisters there was the front desk was in the corner of the foyer there, and so Kay O'Mara volunteered there for the month of March, but they were down in Mexico at that time, and so I did that, and then I got to know Melissa, and people coming in. You'd come in and you'd pay for parking at that time, and got to see these different priests, and they'd be going upstairs. So I got to see and know a lot of people, and with that, so really one thing led to another in terms of opportunities to volunteer here.
Super. Now, Kathleen, your involvement with the OLT, the Ottawa Little Theatre, proved to be a financial benefit to the St. Joe's supper table. Could you outline a bit about this fundraising campaign you initiated?
Yes, that was really fun because I had the opportunity to work with Tom Taylor, a parishioner here too. He stepped in at the last minute and he didn't have a team. He hadn't done anything at Ottawa Little Theatre, I think. I was asked to assist him, and a team was laid on, production team was laid on. Well, here wasn't Tom Taylor, that man I'd seen in church. So I got to know Tom as a parishioner, and of course Diane. And then he thought maybe Colleen Kerr would be good to work on a play too. She might find that interesting. I don't know if we had any other parishioners, to tell you the truth, working backstage. So we decided that we would make some money, and that we would have the preview, which is the first time the audience or the production team has an audience. And so it was great. So we charged $20, I think, to, and I don't even know if we had those double raffle tickets or what, really. So anyway, we sold tickets. And of course Diane always had a nice, she always loved making baskets, so of course we had to have a few raffle items as well. And so we did, and we would announce it, and it was wonderful because people, it was always on a Sunday afternoon. Parishioners could come, the show started at 2 o'clock, they could just leave their cars in the parking lot and walk down. And so I got to know even more people. And really, we did everything but play bingo at the intermission, I'm telling you.
Yes, I've often gone to those theater productions and the first full rehearsal, and I found them very fascinating and interesting because you met a lot of other parishioners who you may not have normally seen in at Mass. You may have seen them at the they may be from the 9:30 or the 5 o'clock Mass on Saturday night. So.
Well, and at one point, our last, I think probably, when you were executive director then, Terry, we had such a good arrangement that Lynn McGuigan was a director down at, executive director at the theater. They even printed the tickets for us.
Yes.
And we guaranteed, I think, so you went down and met her, and we guaranteed that we would sell, say, 300, whatever it was, and so there was a financial arrangement worked out. So it was good while it lasted, but and the other thing is, after, when I would do front of house duties or take tickets at the entrance, I'd see St. Joe's people, and we knew the face, we knew each other's face, so it was always just continued,
Super. Now, Kathleen, you are well known in the parish as a great organizer. Would you describe some of the activities you were involved in?
The first was helping Gary.
Terry Byrne.
Yeah, I think he and Melissa, I don't really know because I didn't know upstairs then. I think maybe he and Melissa shared an area, and then they each had their separate area. But they had 2 sets of filing cabinets, and they pretty much had, it was, they were just across from each other. And so Gary said, okay, let's go through this stuff. Well, it took us a while because he was such a storyteller. And so it was a discard, keep, and then follow up. And there were newspaper clippings, there was everything. So I helped Gary with that. And then incidentally, at that time they were having a work bee at Galilee. And so he said, you and Klaus should come. So we went, so we got to know more about Galilee and of course more parishioners. After that, Father Andy moved from downstairs upstairs, so, and his filing space was limited. And then I helped Mary Murphy with her computer. And then of course there was the music. and Jamie, prior to that, there was Jane Williams, and she photocopied everything. So there were file folders of photocopies. We had a lot of octavos, the printed ones. And this was a concern because Jamie was taking his master's at Ottawa in music, and it was not, you couldn't have these photocopies. So there was a concern for him as music director. So I cataloged the music, and we set up a system, and then we got binders, and so that was pretty much the end of the organizing, except for other
Minor things.
Yeah.
Now I turn my attention to you, Klaus. You have been quiet and listening to Kathleen, and I should state I've always found you to be a strong supporter of Kathleen. And you've also supported me in with your engineering background. And you know, and anytime I needed something checked out, you're open to doing it and checking it out for us. Now, we have a lot of parishioners in St. Joe's who have written books. Myself, and Chris, but you also have written a book, and you wrote this book, Never Stop Dancing. Dreaming, sorry. I also need my eyes tested. Never Stop Dreaming in your retirement. So what prompted you to write the book?
I would say that I'd have to go through my history insofar that when I was a boy, my father had about 50 or 60 books on the bookshelves. They were sacred, you don't touch them. So I snuck one after the other out and read them in hidden places. And it was a series of adventure books. They were written by a German author called May. And he described adventures of his heroes, adventures in all countries, all kinds of countries. And it was just fascinating to travel in the Saudi desert, to travel in Africa, travel in the Far East, all this sort of thing. Well, as it turned out, once I decided to leave Germany and come to Canada, it was a case of going to university here and figuring out what did I want to do. And it was a question of what kind of engineering I would study, where I would study, and so the follow-up of all of this was that Queen's University and later Waterloo University awarded the kind of degrees I managed to earn. And at some point I was working in the various companies that allowed me to earn the income that I needed to go to university. Mm-hmm. And from there on, it was a case of trying to explore the world and trying to explore all the kind of possibility that my engineering education, which was on top of trade qualifications I had earned in Germany before I came to Canada. And so I ended up working for several American companies, and they moved some of their people around. And so that, together with some Canadian companies, which moved me as well. So I ended up living and working in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, in Korea, as well as taking trips to Sumatra, Singapore, and that sort of thing. So in the end, I did a heck of a lot of traveling, and I have to step back a minute. Before all of this happened, I had to go and, as I said, earn my degrees and earn an income and raise a family on a by-the-way basis. So all of this is to say that I managed to go around the world a few times. Ultimately I wrote a book, and the picture on the front of the book is the picture of the Iguazu waterfalls in South America, in Argentina. And this is where Kathleen came into the picture. So what else can I say? Yes, Kathleen came into the picture and she dragged me kicking and screaming into St. Joe's and said, "You gotta help them with some of your engineering skills."
Yeah.
So I kicked and screamed and helped with some of those skills.
Oh, I don't think you kicked and screamed too much. Thank you, Klaus. Now, Kathleen, coming back to you, you're currently leading the Pastoral Visiting Ministry. Can you provide our followers with what the ministry is involved in?
Yes, you know, Terry, really it's not involved in anything at this time. We're a listening ministry, and and what we used to do was visit the retirement homes. Father Richard Kelly, I'll just scroll back a bit. In early 2000, I started as a volunteer at the Civic Hospital, a spiritual care volunteer. Mm-hmm. And Father Richard Kelly knew about this, and he said, "Well, why don't you come to our meetings?" So I did, and that was 2005. Lynn Potty was leading the group, and she was so wonderful. She worked so hard, and we had great meetings. It was always led by a great prayer, and Richard Kelly felt very strongly about giving back sort of to the people in the Sandy Hill community that had built St. Joe's Parish. And many of them are living in retirement homes or in residence. So what we would do is we would visit them and take them to communion if they wished. And that's why I said that we were basically a listening ministry. At the time when I started with Elaine, did I show you that piece of paper, Terry, where she wrote the minutes?
Yes.
And so Elaine would write out the minutes, and yeah. This would be Elaine's copy, and she'd say, "Kathleen, hi from Elaine. For your information, hope things are going okay with you." These are the minutes from the meeting. So she would write these out and come here, I guess, and have it photocopied, and then she would mail out to each one of us. And she said, so at any rate, there were a lot of people at this time on the committee. And they visited both homes. There was one woman that just went to, she visited a widow, and she also went to Maycourt. Audrey McLaughlin was also at the Civic Hospital, but she volunteered. She was an ex-physiotherapist at the Civic. She volunteered 4 days a week at different organizations. Kathy Crow, Joe Diedrich, Rosette, Dorothy, and John Lawler. Now, John Lawler they lived over in Murtenburg. And they had the most, so that we would gather there. They had a lovely apartment, and we would gather there generally for the Christmas parties. And Basil and Kathy Wren would be there. I remember standing on the balcony talking with Basil. And we had Tom Hall, and we would have great potlucks there, sort of at Christmas time or to celebrate. We had, and then things changed. At this time, we had Joyce McDonald. People were just visiting here and there. Well, then came responsible ministries, and there were concerns about vulnerable people that we were visiting, and so that was a diocesan initiative. And so we transitioned. The other thing that went along with this was that we went, it's the time of Father Robert Smith, and they were reorganizing and having more lay involvement and responsibility and less hierarchical in terms of the church administration. So we transitioned away from what we called at that time pastoral care to visiting. And we had the Rideau Gardens, we had 3 retirement homes. And Basil ran, and then Madeline Forger retired, and that was one place that they didn't see anymore. Little by little, the residences were sold and became university residents or condos or whatever. And there was nobody to visit really. And at that time, we had Marion and Francie, the nuncio, would go to one group, and Irene Friday and Marie would go to Sandy Hill residence, and they became quite involved. They would go on a regular basis. It was a day of the week, and I think it was Rideau Gardens maybe that Marion and Francie went to, and you met at 2 o'clock, and they had a little worship service, and they'd have communion and singing. But you better be finished by 2:30 because that's when tea and snacks were served. And they were part of this. They were invited to birthdays, and Irene Friday and Marie, who went to Sandy Hill, journeyed with a person in palliative care that they become quite attached to. So all that, excuse me, so all that changed when we focused, but the ministry just focused on home visits, not the greater. We became part of a cluster at that time. So we also had a requirement. We would go 2 at a time as part of this, because originally we would just go alone, and so we went 2 at a time. We had to have we had a police check and a letter from the pastor, and we had to take pastoral care training, which would be about a 10 or 12 week course. It was once a week. And it was for all the denominations, the churches all in Ottawa supported that. So same requirement as you would have for the civic hospital. So that is, that's kind of switched, but it was Father Richard that brought me into that because of the other, and he just felt so strongly about us looking after the people of St. Joe's that were no longer able to attend, that we keep them.
Good. Now, one final question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any final thoughts you wish to share with us about St. Joe's?
Oh, yeah. But before I go, I want to show our pastoral visiting logo. And also, this was at the back of the church, but really what it amounts to now is, if you live in the Sandy Hill area where we can walk to, and you would like to have a visit, you phone in the office. And I think this might still be at the back of the church. I would have to check, but we don't gather anymore even, you know. My final thoughts are, I love St. Joe's. I just love this, the community. I mean, I have the theater community, and we have a neighborhood community. We have different communities, but St. Joe's is a faith-based community. And there's so many things, there's so many opportunities, so many things we can do. And although I like organizing, I can be a pain because I'm quite a detailed person. But I love the socials. You know, I loved it when you I think you suggested, Terry, that we have the coffee with after the one mass. So we'd have one mass that we tried it, I think, semi-annual, then it became annual, to have just the one mass at 10:30 or something. And then we served coffee and asked people to bring goodies. Well, we got all kinds of stuff, you know, and it was wonderful. And we even bought cups, right? Remember, I think we rented them, and we bought cups, and we had name tags. And so they could, as they came in, people could put, so we socialized from all the different masses, and I just love that. And then the 5:30 mass, or the 5 o'clock Saturday, Patty Barr had a great thing going with the suppers, and everybody was welcome, and people brought something hot, and we sat around at the back after. So there were entertainment nights, a send-off for Father Richard Kelly. And then, of course, Father Andy wanted something much quieter, right? But we had a nice time. I think some kids danced and sang, and it was the talent from among the families as well. And we had meals, you know, and I love that about there are just so many opportunities for a person to share their gifts.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Kathleen and Klaus, for sharing your perspectives on St. Joe's. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Terry, for organizing this and all the other stuff you do.
Well, the idea came from Chris Adam here about doing these, so.
Okay, and it was so nice of Chris to come back from his trips abroad to be able to do this. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.